with Ryan.
Today we are learning basketball with Joe Viray. That's at Joe Viray NBA on Twitter. Joe is an NBA writer who covers the Golden State Warriors. He writes for Golden State of Mind and the Dub Nation HQ and covers the general NBA with SB Nation NBA. So really love Joe's work. He has some incredible film breakdowns, Twitter threads, game threads, pre-game, post-game articles, like anything you need on the Warriors. Joe's got you covered with some in-depth coverage and just some really smart basketball mind thinking things between the stats, the film, the plays, the analytics, just using it all to create a great scouting outline profile that anyone can digest very easily. It does incredible work, and can't wait to kind of dive into his mind today and react to, Steph and Jimmy. Just an incredible game one. Draymond is looking like peak Draymond. The Warriors are back. The Dubs are back. How you doing today, Joe?
First of all, thank you for the intro. Really appreciate it. But yeah, I mean, it's playoff basketball. Considering this time last year, the Dubs flamed out of the play-in against the Kings. I'm just glad to be working at this time of year because just like the team, just like most teams, there's like the regular season mode and then there's playoff mode, and I find myself more engaged, more motivated to work at this time of the year because not just the Warriors, but all the teams that are in the playoffs. Like there are games going on right now, and I can't wait to go through them. Also, like I did last night's game, so it's just a good time to be a basketball sicko. You know that. You know that a lot better than most people, and also all our mutual friends on Twitter. But yeah, I mean, I just like I've already logged in a lot of film work and then just casual like viewing because all the games have been like mostly all of the games have been fun except for like the blowouts, the 50-point Thunder win. But yeah, I mean, I can't wait to talk about basketball. Can't wait to talk Warriors because they're always interesting to talk about this time of the year. So yeah, I'm ready to go at it.
Hey, that's what playoff basketball is all about. Like this is what it's all for. All the scouting is all the draft work. It's to build a team that can be good enough to compete in these couple of weeks for the ultimate prize. And it's just cool to think about it. It's the best entertainment product basketball has to offer, in my opinion, up there with just about, I mean, anything Olympics, FIBA. Like this is playoff NBA basketball, best of the best, going at it. And yeah, a couple blowouts here and there. There weren't all even matchups, but man, ton of great games. That the ones that were great, and even some of them that ended up a little bit of a blowout were still pretty close most of the way. And just some really interesting matchups across the board. I can't wait to dive in and kind of see what happens in some of these other series. We got Clippers Nuggets tipping off probably after this pod wraps. Like that'll be an interesting back and forth. I want to see how that kind of plays out if the Clippers can bounce back, because I would have thought the Clippers almost should be earn the right to almost be the favorites in that series based on their play this year, how strong Zubats and Harden have been, and that team has been so solid all year. So, but the Nuggets were tough and they brought that experience out and they held it down. So that's the beauty of the basketball. We got to see it play out. We got to see the clashing styles and see the different matchups. The regular season is, helps predict the success for this, but it's really you earn the seed and now you got to do it all again and prove it again that you're the better team. So, this is the time to watch. Great time. And, we're talking about one of the most exciting players in the world here in Steph Curry. We're going to celebrate him, dive into game one, the matchup with the Rockets this series. But, before we dive into all things playoffs, I'd love to hear a little bit about your process, just watching film. Like, when you're watching a game, are you looking for anything in particular when you want to break down film clips of that game? Are you looking for matchups? Are you looking for certain plays being run, or is it more of a reactionary thing where you're like, "Oh, that was pretty interesting. How did they create that advantage? Let me go back, watch the tape, and then really break this down clip by clip, step by step, and see, oh, it was this action leading to that action that led to that shot that I really like." So, what is your process like? Just kind of breaking down film and watching film to begin with.
Well, believe it or not, before you asked me like to examine how I go through a film, I never really asked myself that question. Like when you ask me that question, I'm like, how do I go through the process? Because to tell you the truth, I don't really have like a step by step kind of like structured way of viewing film. I just kind of like, during the game itself, it's kind of hard to view everything from a bird's eye view because you're kind of like distracted by all the big plays, all of the extra shenanigans that happen during a live game. I try my best. I mean, when I post the clips on Twitter, I try to like, zero in on everything that I can that casual viewers may not see like immediately. But it's hard to do that on a live viewing. So it's on the rewatches where like I do most of the like all of the details, all of the nitty gritty details of all of the possession basis types of analysis. So to like when I do the rewatches, I also don't have like a structured way of going through it. Like whatever catches my eye. Like for example, if I see a possession where, you know, Draymond rotates over to, trap the box. Trapping the box is when he goes over to help on a drive and then someone else sinks in behind him. I mean, those are the possessions where I see, okay, this might be interesting. And then I kind of like see how does the rest of the defensive personnel, how do they rotate behind that? Do they rotate behind that? And if not, then why? Is it because of the person they were guarding? Is it because they weren't paying attention? Is it because they just generally weren't aware of what was happening at the time? So basically, me, I just look for events that happen, and then I just take note of it. Like I don't really look for anything specific. Like I don't preempt anything. It's just, this is interesting, and oh, okay, I didn't see that during the live game. Maybe I should take note of that. And then from then on, I look for patterns. Like, does this missed rotation keep happening, or does this misread keep happening on offense? For example, like maybe he could have made that pass to that open guy right there. Does he make that same read the next time over? So yeah, like it's kind of like chaotic. It's much the same, very much the same way the Warriors play in many aspects, where it seems like it's random. It seems rather chaotic, freelance. But Jimmy said something last night about Steph and organized chaos, and I'd like to think of it that way in a sense where my process might seem excuse me, might seem chaotic, might seem like to everyone else like you don't really have a process, like you just do whatever, but to me it's the best way I can be organized because the organization comes through when I'm finished with everything and it all paints a picture that makes sense to me personally. I mean, it might not work for everyone, but to me it works, and it's been working ever since I got into this space. So yeah, I mean, I don't think I'll change that. I'll change anytime soon. I mean, that doesn't make me close to trying something new. I mean, you're always learning in this space. Like if you close yourself off to change or potential for change or doing something different, and I don't think you'll get far in this environment. So I'm very open to change. But yeah, that's like the process that's worked for me so far.
Hey, as long as it comes out looking clean and organized, I mean, the process works for you, as you're saying. And I think everyone's process is probably a little bit different. I've asked a few different creators that a variation of that question, and you get a whole myriad of results and answers where, some people have a thought going in and they're scouting a matchup and they see something and that's kind of what they track versus maybe it just kind of pops up as they're looking. It can go back and forth. You can be looking at the stats and you notice something and then you go back and check the film and see how it happened, or vice versa. Maybe you saw something and then you go check the stats and you say, oh, they're actually a top 5 team at that. No wonder I've noticed it a few times. Maybe there's a whole article there. So I think the creative process, it gets almost lost in translation to the viewers and fans because they just expect the results, so they almost don't even know or think about how it gets there. So it's interesting to think about, and that the the industry in general is kind of what I wanted to ask you about next. Is just your experience, covering the team. Are there any pros and cons to the way that you cover the team now, and any goals you have for your own career there, and any advice you have to others trying to also break into basketball media and either cover teams or write about the league, or break down analytics or break down a player development story, just whatever it may be, whatever interests them. What advice might you have to anyone trying to break into the field of sports media?
Be the pros are twofold. Like, first pro, I get to cover the team that I grew up watching, the team that I grew up being a fan of. Back like I watched the team like back when they were really, really down there in the bottom. Like no one, like not a lot of people even knew there was a team in the Bay Area. So, but yeah, I mean, as a kid watching them, you just kind of stick with them. I grew up with people in the Bay Area who grew up Lakers fans because, of course it's not hard to be a Laker fan, especially when you idolize someone like Kobe, the championship teams. But yeah, I mean, I stuck with my guns, cheered for them, and then finally paid off with them being good. Finally, when Steph came along, Draymond, Clay, and I mean, some people say that you shouldn't try to cover the team that you were a fan of or you're a fan of. And I think there are merits to that, but also me personally, I think I find myself like I found covering the Warriors being my entry point into the industry. Like I got interested in the way I analyze the game, the way I cover the game because of the Warriors, because of Steph, because of how Steve Kerr runs this offense, because of how they, revolutionize not only the offensive side of the floor, but also the defensive side in terms of switching, in terms of playing small. So, if your entry point to the industry is you want to cover the team that you're most interested in, that you're a fan of, then by all means, just cover them. I mean, I don't think there's anything wrong with that as long as you manage to stay as measured as you if you don't delve into the super fan territory, stan territory, you call out stuff that you need to call out, then I think it's fine. But also me personally, I mean, if I get an opportunity to cover the NBA in general or another team, then why not, right? I mean, it's hard to break into this industry. And, that's the other pro, because the other pro is I just love basketball in general. I grew up playing it. I grew up watching it. My dad got me into it. The first game that I can remember, I barely remember from my childhood because I was super young, was Game 6 of the 1998 finals. And, with Jordan, the shot. And, I can't remember if it was during that series or the previous one with the flu game. So, I didn't get to witness that personally, but, I watched clips of that, and then my dad got me into that. And I just love basketball from then on, and then became a fan of the Warriors because I grew up in the Bay Area. So, yeah, I mean, that's the other pro of covering the game. And then now the cons is, it's hard to break into the industry, obviously, because, there's a exceptionally high barrier of entry. You kind of need to know the right people. You need to kind of have connections, and if you don't, you need to kind of have the moxie to connect with people, contact the right people, make friends, network, and all that. And even if you try your hardest to do it, I mean, there might be just someone who gets there first than you, and it can be discouraging. That can make you want to give up. But if you really want to do it, then you just keep on trying. And and the other thing is it's not really a high paying profession, so you kind of have to have to accept the fact that for the first few years you're not going to make a lot of money, and then after a few years you will make money, but it's not that much, maybe just enough to pay the rent, maybe a bit of groceries here and there. but you know, you kind of have to accept that it's a slow crawl. It's the journey. You know, if you're willing to take the brunt of everything that the profession will throw at you in terms of, hey, you're not going to get there in a year or two. You're not going to be paid handsomely, probably for first few years, if at all. Then, if you're willing to do that, if the passion for the game, the passion for the profession is driving you, then yeah, by all means, go for it. But you know, it's not easy. I'm not gonna lie, but it's worth it if you really love what you do.
Yeah, I was gonna say you really gotta love this stuff to do it the way you describe, and really, I think that's a great point, especially for covering a team. I think we get lost in that conversation with kind of how like real important news, like real life current events, should not really have biased news sources like trying to spin things. Like we're not covering life and death, we're covering basketball here, and so like the people that care the most probably are the fans. So I think having fans that also cover the team, like I think that's an important voice to have in general, to kind of have the perspective of the fan out there, because they care more than anybody else, really. That's kind of what it's all ends up being about, is the fans of this league, in terms of just like who's reading this and who's watching this stuff. Like that is pretty much the people that live and die with it. So why not have one of those people cover the team as well? And I think, like as you said, like there can be a difference between like focusing, like that being the fulfillment factor, like that being the inspirational factor as to like why you want to be there, maybe being a little underpaid every day, all these games, X's and O's, like because you care, versus maybe when there's more serious topics, that's where you want to make sure that whether it's you or someone else, that there's some kind of real journalism going on as well, because at the end of the day, these are real businesses with real kind of issues and factors that pop up that are not basketball, that are just people related. So there, I think that's kind of where we get lost with the sports media and the journalism topic. But I don't think there's really a problem with it, because like you got to love basketball to do this, as we say. So like it just kind of goes in hand, and if you can break in by covering the team you love the most, I mean, why not? Like you said, it's really hard to make the connections and build the network that you need to really break into this league. And all you can do is keep showing up, keep doing good work, and keep treating people the right way, and hope that network builds out to the point where you get the right opportunity. And I know you're putting in that work covering the team, and that's right around the corner for you as well. So can't wait. And I think it's time we dive right into this Warriors team. And so the Jimmy trade, Jimmy Butler, the Butler and the Chef. I mean, they're incredible. Like this like clashing style of Steph shooting gravity, Jimmy's downhill gravity. They just complement each other, creating like this dynamic push and pull gravity that it almost extends Steph's gravity in my mind, to now have two tenets of the same like rope that's being stretched or something. So like this impossible to guard offensive gravity is now here. You reinvigorate Draymond Green. He's playing like a defensive player of the year, loaded with depth of smart, talented defenders like Gary Payton and Moses Moody, pods around the lineup, Kevon Looney. What has Jimmy's presence done for this team, between the defense with him and Draymond, that dynamic offensive attack with Steph, and just the overall energy and belief that this team can compete with any team in the league there is right now? And the stats back it up from before the Jimmy trade and after it.
Yeah, I mean, like I don't know how in tune you've been with Warriors Twitter, Warriors discourse, but there's always been this talk of Steph needing a second banana, you know, a co-star, you know, uh, as Jimmy would put it, the Robin to his Batman, and they finally got it. I mean, you know, there's been this push and pull. Like, like if you're the Warriors, do you save your assets? Do you kind of like keep like the youth, the second timeline movement close to you, like maybe you can trade for a future star, or maybe they can develop into like pieces that will help you down the line when Steph is, declining, when Draymond is declining, and then they finally retire. And then there's this other party where, you got to trade for someone right now. I mean, there's only a few years left of Steph and Draymond being this good, being this, at the top of their game still. And, they finally pulled the plug on Jimmy. And, to be honest, the camp that, say, hey, trade for someone now, they were proven right. And Jimmy's been really, like, I think it's like, I wouldn't say culture changing, but culture enriching, in the sense that he is the typical glue guy who connects everything on the floor, both on offense and defense, sort of like in the mold of an Andre Iguodala, but obviously he's a much better player than Andre Iguodala, in the sense that if you just give him the ball and then you want him to score, he can go do it. If you want him to make a play, if you want him to collapse the defense and create an advantage, he can do it. And he's been doing that so far. The last two, the last regular season game against the Clippers, the playing game against the Grizzlies, and now in game one against the Rockets, he's been playoff Jimmy all the way. Like what they traded him for, he's been doing it. I mean, like if you talk about on defense, where he forms that tandem with Draymond, and like teams just cannot get anything. Like if you get past the first line of defense, I mean, there's Jimmy and Draymond blowing things up, and they're ready to rotate. And then, it's just Jimmy's gap help, his nail help, his fundamentals in terms of where to be. And then Draymond just diagnosing the situation and then just directing things on the floor. I mean, there's a reason they were the number one. They were the number one defense post the Butler trade, and they've been a big part of that, and people overthought that, but it's when you have Butler and Draymond on a team defending, it's a no-brainer. And in the same manner, it's a no-brainer that Butler and Steph on offense just mesh well together, especially when you have Jimmy screen for Steph. When you have Steph screen for Jimmy, they can flip that around on an inverted pick and roll. And then Jimmy's just a natural fit in the offense, because people forget that he was in a Miami system where it's kind of similar to the motion offense that the Warriors run, where they run a lot of split cuts, they run a lot of motion, they run a lot of they run a lot of off-ball movement, off screens. And Jimmy didn't really need that much integration into the system, because it's very, very similar to what Eric Spoelstra runs in the Miami. I mean, there are a few differences, but philosophically, the systems are the same. So it really was a seamless fit. And
best record in the NBA since the Jimmy trade. They're top 3 in point differential, defensive rating, forcing turnovers, points off those turnovers, drawing free throws, the free throw percentage. And they were like middle of the pack in a lot of these ratings before the trade. So that just shows some of the drastic differences Jimmy has brought. They're also like 7th in offense, 13th in half court offense, 5th in half court defense since that. You mentioned in your piece how they're on a 61 win pace at a 23-8 record. They climbed as high as the 5th seed, starting from the 12 seed. And that's all since the Jimmy trade. I mean, they were kind of hovering around middle of the pack, talking about like, well, they have to boot another season and go to the lottery and kick the can again down the road. And then they trade for Jimmy, and he's just a one hit fix. It's really one of the best in season trades ever, because they rarely work. Like they rarely actually. There is rarely a team that is one piece away from contending truly. And this team happened to actually be it. I mean, normally you think of, if only we could get like a 3-and-D ninth man to fill that last role, that will push us over the edge. Warriors traded for a superstar in Jimmy Butler, who, might have not been playing like himself, but we've seen this movie before. Like he looks incredible. He suddenly doesn't look as incentivized to play hard with the team, and then he moves to the next team. But right now this is the phase you want to be with Jimmy Butler, is right when you trade for him. Like at the very least, Jimmy is in full like prove everyone wrong mode the rest of this season. that, the Miami treated him wrongly, so he has something to prove there. And then it's just a natural fit. I love the Iguodala mention at the very least. We don't have to make everything a direct comp. Like they're both elite defenders that you're bringing into the wing. Flanking Steph with elite defenders is just a recipe for success. That's one of the underviewed parts of that Warriors dynasty. Even is it's Steph and Clay, the Splash Bros with Draymond setting everything up, but they're flanking Steph with like incredible switchable, versatile defenders that are just smart team first players, from Iguodala back to Sean Livingston off the bench to even Barnes kind of holding that role in the lineup back in the kind of the peak early Warriors days. And that's just, a proven model of success. They changed the game. And so here you have clipped up of a few of the Jimmy-Steph inverted pick and rolls to show us how they've kind of broken Jimmy into the lineup here and evolved the offense out from what tends to be a lot of off-ball screens and off-ball movement for Steph. Now they can kind of use Jimmy's downhill gravity, Steph Curry's shooting gravity, to show a little pick and pop action to kind of force the defense to pick one and read and react from there. So I'll click play here and kind of let you walk through this play here.
Yeah. This is actually a play that, Steve Kerr has used in the past with Team USA, with LeBron in the Jimmy role, Embiid in the Draymond role. I barely remember a play that they ran in one of the exhibition games. But yeah, I mean, this play is really tough to defend if you're a Warriors opponent, because you've got Jimmy handling the ball, and then you've got one of the best guard screeners in history in Steph. And then you've got to make a decision at the point of attack, because most teams, they don't want to detach themselves from Steph. So, if you see Scottie Pippen Jr. here, he's like, he's been told, don't let Steph out of your sight at all times. So you're not going to switch on to Jimmy. And then if you're Desmond Bain, you're going to want to fight over. But then Steph sets a really nasty screen, and that allows Jimmy to turn the corner and drive downhill. And then when you're the low man, like Zach Edey, you're sagging off of Draymond. I mean, most defenders, their instinct when you're defending Draymond is to sag off. You're like, yeah, hey, he's not going to shoot that. Like, he's not going to shoot that ball, and if he does, he's not going to make it. So that's what makes this play work so well, is because they're using the defense's rules against them. Don't detach off of Steph. You can detach yourself from Draymond as much as you want. And then when Jimmy goes downhill and collapses the defense, he throws the Draymond all of a sudden in the corner, and then they do this maneuver. Some people call it a blind corner handoff, a dead corner handoff. I call it a blind corner handoff because it's kind of like blind pig-ish, from the triangle offense. And then you've got Zach Edey in the paint helping on the Jimmy drive, and he can't help on the Steph drive, on the Steph handoff, because he's way over there in the paint, and then you're dead. If you're the defense, I mean, that's an open, that's a wide open shot for Steph.
Dead in the water.
You're dead in the water, and you've got to think about a lot of things if you're the defense here. Even the smartest defenses, even the most well-equipped defenses, they can't be perfect all the time. And against Steph, you have to be near perfect. And you saw it last night in Game 1, where, when you think about the April 6th matchup, when Amen Thompson and Fred VanVleet and Dillon Brooks collectively held Steph to 3 points. And then yesterday, it's just like, you can't repeat the same performance. It's near impossible to do that against Steph. Steph will not score just 3 points. Like, I don't know, maybe I won't say never, but it's not going to be anytime soon. So, you just have to be near perfect if you're defending Steph, and that's just like a 99.9% chance of not happening. Like, Steph will find ways to burn you, and now that he's got Jimmy, I mean, that's like 99.99%. So, yeah, I mean, it's just tough to defend.
Yeah, I love how they just keep reinventing ways to use Steph, and Steph's like motor and footwork is just so underrated. Like, the guy just never stops moving, and defenders have to, like, the idea that he can be like a lights out shooter at the end of the fourth quarter after running however many miles he just did around the entire court is insane. It makes you think of his like practice, one of those drills he runs in practice where he just runs to like every spot on the floor back and forth between the 3-point line to get shots up and kind of get that breath under him. But just watching this play makes me think of like the peak Warriors basketball, going back to Iguodala and Clay, where you can't double anybody. And once an offense becomes that hard, where if you try to double Steph or double Jimmy, you're leaving somebody wide open, that's where it just becomes impossible. And now you're able to use that idea on one action and then start the next action where it's like, okay, yeah, maybe you kind of stop Jimmy's drive, but let's just stretch you to the other side of the floor with another handoff for Steph. Like, how often does Steph actually get open? And yet there are multiple plays per game where actions like these are created and Steph just ends up open because he just doesn't, and he just never stops relocating, and that just can't be underrated enough in terms of his legacy and what's his skill set thrives at. And so here's another example of the inverted pick and roll with Steph and Jimmy, where I think it's becoming quite common where guards who can shoot are now setting screens in inverted pick and rolls because it's hard to switch and it's hard to defend because you now have this guard that can dribble, pass, and shoot popping out for a catch and shoot three. And normally whoever's running the pick and roll probably has enough of a handle to get downhill and actually initiate the thing, or else they wouldn't be running it. So it might be inverted compared to like 20 years ago, but everyone in today's league can dribble and pass a little bit, and a lot of them can read and run offenses. So it's a creative way to use shooters off the ball and kind of use that gravity to stretch the floor off the ball, because you can't really send two to the driver when Steph Curry is running around the perimeter popping out for threes. So what did you notice on this set?
Yeah, like this was actually an earlier version of the previous play, but obviously Jimmy was still kind of integrating himself within the team. I think this was just like an early Feb matchup, and Jimmy was just trying to learn actions. And this was actually supposed to be the same play as last one, but Jimmy kind of like he said, "Hey, Draymond," like he throws it to Draymond, and then he kind of made a read and then cuts off of Steph's screen, so to speak. And when Steph goes up, then he draws two. That's when Jimmy cuts. And I think this just goes to speak to Jimmy's feel, his intuition, and how he reads stuff on the floor, and how that skill set fits within the team. Where that wasn't how it was supposed to go, the play, but then he sees Steph running up to him, and then he's like, hey, maybe Steph can draw my defender away from me in addition to his defender, and then he throws it to Draymond, and then he cuts off of Steph, setting like the kind of like the fake screen, the ghost screen, and then Steph does draw to himself, and then that's what Steph does, and then Jimmy just naturally cuts off of that, and then he just knows what to do. I mean, the thing with the Warriors offense is like, and it's part of the problems that they've had in the past few years, is that they run a system where you need to have at least a certain level of feel, a certain level of knowing what to do. And I think they have several players over the past few years where that they needed to have their hands held, so to speak, in terms of where to be on this floor, what to do in certain situations. Do you shoot? Do you pass? You need to have a sense of where you need to be, and I think they didn't have that over the past few years, and Jimmy just kind of like fits into that. He's the player they've been looking for, over the past 6 years, to be honest. I mean, 2022, Steph didn't really have a second banana, but they had those like high field players in abundance when you talk about Otto Porter Jr., for example. And Jimmy's kind of like a supercharged version of all of those role players who had that feel. And because, he can be that secondary superstar. Like they can play your turn, my turn basketball. Like, hey, Steph wants to rest, Jimmy can go do his thing. If Jimmy's not on the floor, then Steph is Steph. Steph has carried that offense for years, and he'll carry that offense for a few more years to come, even when Jimmy's not on the floor. And something that I wanted to point out also with this clip is, when Jimmy's making his move, when he's cutting off of Steph, lifting up, there's this subtle exchange on the weak side between Pods and Moody where, they kind of freeze their defenders into what to do. Like, so that's like you see Pods and Moody, they kind of exchange spots, and then that freezes their defenders. And then normally when you have a drive like that, the weak side comes over to help. And just those little things where, hey, let's move on the second side. Let's occupy our defenders. And that goes a long way. I mean, and that's also a high feel thing, where Pods and Moody, they they just don't stand still. They help Butler have an open lane to the rim. And it's those subtle things that, keep you on the floor. And, for Pods, he's had his problems in other areas, but he's the reason why Steve Kerr plays him is, he knows what to do in those situations. Whereas Moody, he's improved in those areas. He's had to work his way into, a position of trust from Steve Kerr, but he's been doing much better in that aspect. And that's part of the reason why this lineup, Steph, Butler, Draymond, Moody, and Potts, they've been the best five-man grouping for them ever since Jimmy started playing for them. So yeah, I mean, I think this just goes to show that if you have a high feel, if you work hard, then Steve Kerr will trust you, and then it'll pay dividends.
Yeah, you noted that lineup is a plus 18 net rating, essentially over 450 minutes since the trade. So just a killer 5-man lineup for them to roll out. It's a great point on the offside action. I mean, role players and other players should kind of realize that every action and step they take on that court affects it. So like even if these two corner guys know they're not getting the ball, just like you said, just by switching, forces the defenders to pay a little attention to them and be distracted from the action that's happening on the other side. Where if they just stand still and don't move and look lazy, don't look uninterested, the defenders could cheat over. They could close off the paint. They could take away that cut from Jimmy. But like you said, just that small little switch forces the defense to actually pay attention and react and switch over themselves. So that just enough time to, you know, get away with a wide open layup. And, another one where that feel, like you mentioned, just reminds me a little of Iguodala, I guess. Just that off ball IQ. I know IQ as a word is out of the fold now. Basketball IQ, we call it feel now. So that decision making. I mean, it's clear. It's like you said, they're running a play to run a handoff for Steph in the corner, but Jimmy notices two are with Steph. Like the moment that both of them peel over, he makes the immediate cut. And like you kind of put it, like he does all the role player things really well. Like he's a star that does high end role player things well, especially when he's engaged. He's just everywhere defensively. He's active multiple times where he'll cheat over and steal the ball from behind for a breakaway layup. We can dive into the game here. I remember like the last kind of play, the exclamation point. He did exactly that. He stole the ball, tipped it back to Draymond, and Draymond threw like a no look perfect pass ahead to Jimmy for a breakaway dunk. It just felt like they were just fully in sync. Like they've been playing together for years, and they just know how to play winning basketball between the off ball movement, the defense, and maybe the idea that they're not knockdown 3-point shooters, so they know how to kind of find the ones who are on their team between Steph and Buddy. So, on Draymond, obviously, I think Jimmy has kind of revitalized him or re-energized him a little bit. What are your thoughts on the Defensive Player of the Year award compared to this second question? Is Draymond the best defender alive? Still,
I look at it. I look at that argument the same way that people look at the MVP argument. Like, to me, Shea is the MVP. I just think that the numbers that he's putting up, and then the way that he's been the best player on clearly the best team during the regular season. I think Shea's the MVP, but I do think that Jokic is still the best player in the world. So in that sense, I think when you talk about Defensive Player of the Year, to me, sure, I have my biases. Like if you ask me as a Warriors fan, I think Draymond should be the Defensive Player of the Year, but like I'm not gonna be up in arms if like Evan Mobley wins it because Evan Mobley will deserve it if he wins it. Uh, to me, if let's say Evan Mobley wins it, then sure, yeah, he deserves it. But I still think that as a whole, Draymond's still the best defender alive.
there it is.
Uh, the best defender of this generation. When you consider how he's had to guard every position, how he's been one of only a couple in the league that can defend all five positions, and then the responsibility that he has on the floor on a nightly basis, where he's not gonna win his matchups every time. Like when you talk about one on one, like of course all the good scorers, the great scorers will get a one up on it. Will get the edge on him, like Jokic. Şengün was able to get a few buckets over him. Like when you consider the poster dunk, just like at the start of the game. I mean, and like people will get theirs one on one against Draymond, but that's not really what Draymond is all about. He's about directing things on the floor. He's about communication. He's about switching from one possession he can guard the center, and then the other he can guard the point guard, and then that can also happen within the same possession. And then he has to rotate. He has to clean up the mistakes that are made elsewhere. The point of attack on the weak side. He just has a lot of responsibility on his head because on the team he's the only one that can do that. And then without him, everything falls apart. Much like in the same way that Steph does on offense, where without Steph the offense falls apart or just has to work harder to create a shot. On defense, if Draymond's not there, then someone else or like a group of people has to take the load, and not I don't think anyone else on the team, save for maybe Jimmy, can do what Draymond does, and even then Jimmy can only do so much because he doesn't have the profile that Draymond has. Draymond is 6'6", generously 6'6", with a 7'1" wingspan, and I think that's an under discussed aspect of Draymond is his physical. Like he's kind of like this physical unicorn. He's 6'6", but then he has a 7'1" wingspan. Right. So that helps him kind of like contest shots at the rim. That helps him contain when he has to contain. So that helps him dig. Like he had a few possessions last night where he made those digs, where he made those gap help turnovers. And yeah, I mean Draymond, he may not be the defensive player of the year this year. Like we can argue or we can discuss all day long on whether he deserves it or not. But to me, I think he's still the best defender alive. And then he's still the best at what he does nightly on the defensive end.
Yeah, I mean, he's a one-man defensive anchor to this day. Like, I think especially since the Jimmy trade, like, I'd say he's been the best defender in the league since the Jimmy trade. Like, that's the moment where, like, they have if that was the entire season, I think he would win the award. But because of the reasons you stated, like, it's not even narrative based. Like, there have been guys like Evan Mobley, Jaren Jackson. You could cover your eyes and just point at the Thunder and probably find a pretty good candidate between Lou Dort, Jalen Williams, and Shea. Ahmed Thompson flying around for Houston, Dyson Daniels for Atlanta. So, like, do I actually, like, if I was just picking one game or one defender, like, no, I'd probably still lean Draymond for all that sort of things. But the awards are meant to, celebrate the season. And I think, celebrating the Thunder or Cavs with one of their best defenders is probably the right move given how great stories those were this season. But yeah, if you're just going like the last month or for the playoffs, like Draymond's the guy. He still has everything you said, where he just is like a walking deflection or a walking forced turnover. Like he's the measurables you just mentioned are really insane to think about. That a guy that's only 6'6" can be essentially a center in this league, or at least a big man, because of his wingspan and the girth and the strength and the IQ and the feel that comes with that he brings to the game. He's one of the smartest defenders to ever play, where he can use his hands and length effectively to force deflections and contest shots and force those turnovers off the deflections. And he's just a one-man anchor like few others really have been, where you can throw him out there. And especially like it becomes even more powerful when you surround him with an elite wing defender like Jimmy, with high-end impact defenders like Gary Payton, Moses Moody, Kevon Looney, Pods, like surrounding them in the lineup around Steph as well. Like it just becomes a very powerful defense that is reminiscent of the peak Warriors days, with switchable defense around Steph. And like you said, one of the best unique defenders in the world, one of the best unique scorers and shooters in the world. They pair together offensively. They complement each other for floor balance. And it's just an all-time pairing. So it's exciting to kind of get to see them go one more run at it with this Warriors team. And of course, it's against the Rockets, which they have like a historical. It's not quite a rivalry because they never really lost, but they beat them up quite a few times, and they were both some of the best offenses of those peak days. So same places, new faces kind of thing. They get to see this team again in the playoffs. Let's dive into game one a little bit here. How many times did you look up at the TV, you see Steph has the ball, and within 10 seconds, you say some variation of, oh my God, what just happened? How did he do that? Because I had at least 3 of those moments.
Like I've been watching this team, I've been watching Steph for like more than a decade now, and you'd think that, someone like me would be like, I just shrug, hey, it's just another day in the office for Steph. But yeah, I mean, it's tough not to be amazed, like I've probably seen, that shot that Steph had over Jalen Green, when he was fading, like looked like out of bounds. Like I've probably seen that shot, or like a variation of that shot, like probably at least twice or 3 times before. And I'm like at that moment, it's like the first time you've ever seen something like that. Like, oh my
Right.
God. Like, come on, man. Like, seriously. And then, as a Warriors person, like you're like, maybe from the outside perspective, like your perspective and other people's perspective, it's like, oh shoot, like that's amazing. But for me, I'm thinking of it like, hey, sure, like that was a great shot, but Steph kind of saved them again. Like, you kind of wait for the other shoe to drop. Like me personally, like when will Steph stop shooting shots like that successfully, or at a much lower rate than he has right now? Because the clock's ticking. He's not getting any younger. And then when Steph starts to kind of like slow down, then like who will do that? Who will step up? So you kind of cherish those moments as they happen, because it's not gonna last. Like, Steph's 37. He probably can play till he's like 39 or 40, but maybe when he's 39 or 40, he's more of like a role player, like a JJ Redick, Kyle Korver role. You hope not. I mean, I think he can still play at a borderline all-star, borderline all-NBA level at that point. I mean, we've seen it happen with LeBron. I mean, he's still at that level, and with today's advances in the modern NBA, players last longer and they can play longer, and then they recover from injuries quicker, and the fall off isn't as drastic. But you kind of take those moments and you cherish it, and then when the time that Steph finally calls it a day, then yeah, you kind of like look back and say, hey, you look back at those moments, and you can tell your children, hey, I was there. I was there when Steph, like, I was lucky to have witnessed it, and then you show it to them. And I do cherish those moments. And the only thing that I wish was, I was there to cover those games personally, but it'll get there.
Hey, it's coming. They'll be lucky to have you very soon. And I hear you, man. Especially watching Steph, like it's like nothing has changed in the watching viewing experience since like the first time you see him 10 years ago. It's like equally wowed by the same impossible shots today as I was then. That we were thinking of the same one. The Kevin Harlan streams that geometrically that should not have happened. He just has some great calls there. Just a methodical like Steph took his time too, where he was like, I'm a stutter rip. I'm gonna use my footwork here. I'm gonna fake like 4 different ways, and Jalen Green's gonna fall for every single one, and then I'm gonna take off to the right for a fadeaway pull up three. Just insane. Later he had a pull up over Ahmed Thompson that nearly touched the ceiling of the arena. It was such a high arcing shot. Then like another clutch one, 5 minutes left to go up 7 points. He's like running away from the rim into a 30-foot floater off a sideline out of bounds pass or something to beat the buzzer. Like just an insane shot making across the board. Just shout out to Steph. I'm just glad we get to watch it one more time. So, you dove into the matchup itself with Houston in your piece, breaking down both before the series, what could happen, and then after the game, what did happen. And I was interested in some of the Rockets defense and their game plan that you think could change over the course of this series. You noted that the Warriors defense in game one was informed by 3 Rocket stats, mostly about passing, that the Rockets are last in passes per game, last in assists per 100 possessions, and last in assist rate. So how would you say the what drew you to that conclusion? How would you say the Warriors used those stats and took advantage in their game plan? And then, how do you think we'll probably cover a little more of like how do you think Houston will counter what happened in game one? Will they pull out? I think Steven Adams is a big X factor where he seemed to have a little advantage on the rebounds for them. So maybe go into that card a little more will be one of the counters for Houston. But, what did you notice between the Warriors' defensive game plan and kind of how the Houston tried to guard Steph and how they might, counter throughout the rest of the series, given the success of like the last game you mentioned where Steph only had 3 points and they were throwing Amen and Tari Eason and Fred VanVleet and Dylan Brooks at him and switching all these different things. So what are your thoughts on the defensive counters in this series and where it could go?
Yeah, it felt like the Warriors when they were defending the Rockets, like the Rockets, like one of the problems that the Rockets have is half court offense. They can't really they have a hard time establishing any sort of rhythm, any sort of uh, coherence in the half court. And we saw plenty of that last night, where they kind of were just floating around and then they just kind of like were passing the ball. Like here, you go make something of this possession. When they were gonna run something, it took them so long to kind of get into the action where they only had a couple of seconds left on the shot clock. And there's just like a problem in process in terms of that. And I think where the Warriors kind of like took advantage of that is they know that someone like Jalen Green is gonna try to, gonna try to score first and pass second. And I think that's like a microcosm of the Rockets' lack of not only initiation, but also just the connective passing, where they don't really have the kind of personnel to connect things together. And that's reflective of their passing numbers, like you pointed out, like I pointed out in the article. And the Warriors are going to load up on the Rockets. They're going to load up on Jalen Green. They loaded up on Jalen Green last night, where they just weren't afraid of the Rockets in terms of shooting, in terms of creation off the dribble. Jalen's probably their best guy in that department, but then the Warriors can just pinch in. They can just divert all of their resources towards stopping that drive, and then they're gonna dare Jalen to shoot. They're gonna dare him to drive, and they're not gonna count on him to pass. And so when you look at a possession like the one that you're flashing on the screen right now, I I lauded Draymond and Jimmy for their defensive fundamentals, their ability to diagnose the play. Draymond, like he's pointing to Gary Payton that, hey, switch with me so we can switch this away screen, switch this action, so you'll end up on Jalen. And once Jalen got GP in isolation, that's where Jimmy comes in, where he stunts at the gap to discourage a drive, to discourage Jalen from turning the corner, while also he's putting his right arm out so that he can also discourage the one pass away to Dylan Brooks. And when you're Jalen and you're facing a defensive like structure like that, it's hard to do something out of that possession where no one else is really moving, and then they're just counting on you to do something. And then even so, when he pulls up, he almost makes a shot, but then it's like the process that's kind of the thing that the Rockets have to work on. It's that how do you make life easier for Jalen? How do you make life easier for Şengün? I mean, even though Şengün like managed to score last night, I mean, it was all in isolation. Like most of it was in isolation, and they didn't really get anyone else going. Amen couldn't get going. Jabari had his moments, but it wasn't enough in my opinion. I think they could have utilized Jabari better because he's their by default he's their best spot up shooter, and he made a couple of threes that closed the gap last night. And I think when they look at the film and then they try to concoct something to kind of take the Warriors off guard for game 2, I think that has to involve Jabari because someone has to take the pressure off of Jalen, someone has to take the pressure off of Şengün, and I think they tried that last night with the Jabari at the 5 lineup, but the Warriors threw out a zone, and then I think Ime kind of just went away from it. But yeah, I mean, to me, I think they have to find a way to get Jabari some meaningful minutes.
Here's a play you had, Jimmy involving Jimmy and Jabari as well.
Yeah. So yeah, this one is it's just another example of Jimmy being a really high IQ defender, and also that kind of bleeds off into the other players as well, where you see Moses Moody here. I mean, it kind of helps that he's defending Amen, so he's more empowered to help off, but it's just basic help the helper fundamentals. Like Jimmy has to defend has to close out against Jabari, and then Jabari smartly attacks the closeout. And then when Jimmy's beat, he peels off and immediately finds Şengün because that's the next pass. So, but then when he peels off, he finds that Moody's beating him to the punch because Moody's like, hey, I've got to, I've got to help the helper, and the helper here is Potts. So like the Warriors have been really smart with their help the helper defense. So like for everyone who doesn't know what help the helper is, it's like when you're defending a drive, and then the low man comes over to help. That means someone from the weak side has to hop over on the helper's man. So when Moody helps off of Amen in the corner, that's when he comes in, kind of tries to sink in against Şengün. So he does that and manages to get the deflection. I mean, even if he didn't get there on time, Jimmy would have been there on time too because he peeled off. And I think that's a combination of good defensive fundamentals and also how problematic the Rockets offense has been in terms of spacing, in terms of personnel, in terms of putting the correct people on the correct spots on the floor. Because sure, I mean, Amen in the corner, he can if you're not a good spacer, if you're not a good shooter, then the best way to counter that is just cut and use the space that's given to you. But also, I mean, that's also makes it easier for Moody's decision to kind of help off of him. And if you're Ime, you have to think of ways to kind of like make it easier on your drivers, on your ball handlers to kind of have space to work with on your drives, and also the options that they have to kick out to kind of maximize their half court offense. And I don't think the Rockets did that last night, and they lived off of their offensive rebounding. It's expected. I mean, they have a higher offensive rating in the regular season than the Warriors, believe it or not, but it's just built off of the backs of their possession game, where they have tons of second chances. Their philosophy is quantity over quality. We just have to get us more shots than the opponent, and just win games by sheer volume. And that did not work last night. Like, it almost did. Like, to be fair, they got within 3 points, but it kind of fizzled out because, in a high stakes playoff situation, having a half court offense is key. And, if you're going to rely on just, the possession battle on the offensive rebounding, then you have to supplement that with a working half court offense. And that's what the Rockets need to figure out over these upcoming games. So, the Warriors have Steph Curry and Jimmy Butler. If things break down, who do the Rockets have if things break down? And I think that's the question that the Rockets have to answer.
Right, that's a tough challenge. Where it's a great way to put it, with winning the possession battle, where doing the little things to win, like the four factors, and get those on your side over the regular season, I think in the aggregate is how to win the most basketball games against the average NBA team, is to focus on those possession battles and win the four factors type of thing. But that helps you make the playoffs. But if every team in the playoffs can do that, then you also need something to kind of separate yourself from the other teams. And I think that half court offensive factor ultimately is kind of the big one, where obviously you can still have an elite defense too, but things get bogged down in the playoffs. And if you don't have multiple creators, if you don't have 5-out spacing, let alone at least 4-out spacing, like, it's really tough to have enough spacing against elite defenses where things like this don't happen. Because, as you noted, the help defense is so good here. They have 2 help defenders in position to make the steal because there's not enough spacing to keep everyone out. People are coming into the paint and sneaking in there, and now you got all these hands breaking up the steal when, like, an overflow of smart defenders making a mess of the paint. So that's how prepared they are, and how much that kind of feel comes into play. And you had one more clip here on the defense with Draymond and his ability to just make a dig and consistently be an impactful defender every play, whether he's probably just as impactful, if not more, as a help defender, that just anchoring the defense, reading the offense, trying to kind of see what's going to happen next and break it all up, because he just has that mind and the ability to kind of put himself in that spatial awareness, use his body the right way to actually break up everything. Like, it's crazy to think how quick he can read an offense and react to actually get a deflection in. So, what stood out to you about this position here?
Yeah, like, it's a combination of how smart and how disciplined the Warriors have been in terms of defense, and also just the personnel for the Rockets. Like, when you start the possession, like, you notice that Jimmy's guarding Amen, and he immediately thinks, hey, I can help out Amen, so I just let me just park myself here at the nail, middle of the free throw line, and Buddy Hield has Jalen on him, and when you're Jalen, you're seeing, oh, Jimmy's like at the nail, and like, I can't drive against this. It's like, hey, like, I'll pass it off to Jabari. And so, like, if you're Jalen here, you're facing an uphill battle immediately because you're not really supplemented with the requisite spacing to kind of have room to work with. And you have to pass to Jabari on the wing, and then Jabari is faced with a lot of, like, it's like a meat grinder of arms and bodies. and the thing that I know, like Draymond is compelled, like, he's compelled to help off of Tari Eason because that's another non-shooter that he can like he's not worried about helping off the strong side corner because normally that's not a thing you do when in the NBA, but when you have Tari Eason one pass away, you're not afraid of his shooting. And then when Jimmy, after helping at the nail, he's just parking himself in that near the dunker spot because Amen is there. So if you opt to pass to Amen, then Jimmy's ready to intercept. So it's just tough to like I see this as both like sure Draymond's a great defender, Jimmy's a great defender, but I see like honestly this more of like hey like the Rockets can do better here. Like you know you can do better than just driving into whatever and doing
Right.
whatever. And but yeah, I'm sure Ime is like drilling them, finding ways to free up Jalen, free up Şengün, and maybe make more use of Jabari. And when the Warriors get stops, and it's all like key principle of basketball is the best offense is good defense. Where they were able to run after this stop, and then they were able to get a split action for Steph. And it's just the mental tax of trying to defend, trying to run back, and then you have to keep tabs of where Steph is. I mean, Dylan Brooks is a great defender, and if the Rockets scored on the other end, he probably would have been in a better position to cut off Steph. But when you have to run back and then you lose track of Steph for even a split second, then Steph can get loose. He can get by
Yeah.
you, and then
It's over.
Draymond does what he does best. So like the overarching principle of like you have to score in order to defend, and then in the same vein you have to defend in order to score. So the defense and offense is always interconnected, and I think the Warriors did like were much better in transitioning from defense to offense. And then for the Rockets, the lesson that they have to learn is how can you weaponize your defense by scoring more in the half court. So I think that's something to look out for in game two. A part of me feels that the Rockets will do better in that regard, but if they can't and then they fall into a 2-0 hole, then that's like deep waters. So they better do something to punch back. And I don't think if you give Jimmy and Steph a 2-0 lead, Draymond, then I don't know. That's tough.
Mm. That's scary times. Going back to Golden State down to 0-2. Oh man, that's not what you want. We've seen crazier things happen. I guess it's not the end of all things, but that's not where you want to be if you're Houston. And I think a similar point is the last clip. Like if the the elite defense is needed to win a championship in my mind. Like every contender is elite at both, but if you don't have if you're trying to like win a game with holes on your roster, like this is the time where they're going to be pointed out. And if you're playing non-shooters in the playoffs, they're going to be treated like non-shooters. And Draymond's not going to pay them any mind, like you're saying, or Jimmy Butler or whoever is guarding them. Like they're just not going to worry about them. They're going to let them shoot. Now you're playing 3-on-5 basketball against elite defenders. It's just almost impossible task unless you have your own Steph Curry to unleash on them, and even then is not easy. So, having not a clear half court offensive system set up, a lack of spacing, like it's gonna be tough to see where Houston generates offense other than kind of the traditional easy ways of our defense is going to be our offense, and we're going to force turnovers and push the pace. Not that it's easy, but more so the easier baskets that every team really wants. They're going to rack up those possessions for the easiest shot possible. So I'm well aware the Orlando Magic have to play a very similar style of the defense has to be there. We need some turnovers. We got to force turnovers and score off of them because I don't know if the offense is going to get any better look than like some quick actions coming off that. And as you say, like no coach or every coach loves to have a set defense. Like there's nothing a head coach loves more than to get their defense set. And that only happens by actually scoring the basketball and having time to get the defensive set. And if you give up a rebound or a turnover, suddenly you're scrambling, and that's when all Steph breaks loose is against a scrambling defense that isn't fully prepared and in sync at all times. It only takes half a step to for him to break free. So, man, some interesting clips here, and Houston's defense is obviously elite, but Golden State has kind of matched them so far, and we've got a real series here where it looks like the lower seed has earned the status of as favorite for the rest of the series for good reason, in my opinion. I mean, they have better star talent, they have the defensive depth, they look like the contender that is elite on both ends. And we'll see how Houston responds. They kind of look like they're fresh in the water, first time here. Obviously, they have a few individuals that have a lot of playoff experience, but as a whole, this is their first time getting that experience. So, hopefully we do see them throw a counter punch. And do you have any other counters in mind that you think they might, pull, or a lineup or a player that might be swing a game in this series? Like, I don't know if he'll be a big factor in this series, but on the Warriors side, I feel like Quentin Post is a little bit of an X factor, like a little hidden card up Steve Kerr's sleeve, where it's like, did you know we have a D&3 center too that we can pull out and throw out on the court? Maybe you haven't watched this season and we can sneak him out on you, because that happened when I was watching the Magic Warriors game. Obviously, Steph goes off for his season high, just blows up for like 50 points. But to me, Quentin Post was the counter move at halftime where Orlando was winning, but Kerr puts Post in, and they just have no answer for a big man playing with that energy that can shoot the three ball. And then suddenly it's an avalanche, and Steph is just hitting every shot imaginable. So it's interesting. It's a fun little factor where maybe a role player makes a big play or has a big game. I think the general defense and awareness of other role guys like Gary Payton, Moses Moody, and Pods has been huge. If you had any thoughts on kind of who will be the Warriors' most impactful role players the rest of the way this series, and if any Rockets come to mind, like what do you think the Rockets can do to throw a counter punch and get back in this thing?
Yeah, I mean, the Quinton Post thing, I think he can still make a mark in this series. I know like a lot, like there's a bunch of talk where, he looked kind of hesitant. He looked kind of soft, for lack of a better term, against the Rockets, especially against their double big lineup. But I think there's still room for him in this series, especially when he has to draw those bigs up or force those bigs up to help make a choice. So I think he can still make an impact in this series. I think, GP2 I think is essential as a screener when you're forcing the Rockets to match up to him with Şengün, and then you can use him to screen for Steph. And then he's a very underrated passer in the short roll, so I think he still has a role in the series. Um, the Buddy Hield talk is he's on and off. Lately has been off. But I think there's a method to the madness in terms of why Steve Kerr still plays him. It's because besides Jimmy and Steph, he's the only one that can really draw a defender to him and can provide space, and then he can draw two to the ball when he's coming off of those screens. And the only other player that can really do that out on the perimeter is Steph. So, I think he'll he'll keep seeing minutes. Um, you know, for better or worse. I mean, worse is when he has those head scratching, why buddy, why moments. But yeah, I mean, I think he still has some utility in this series. Um, for the Rockets, I think I'll just hammer down the point of Jabari, where I think I don't think he was utilized enough in terms of being the focal point, or at least being part of their half court actions. So I think that if the Rockets were to have an X factor, it will have to be Jabari, because he's when if you consider Jalen and Şengün to be their first or second in the pecking order in terms of scoring, in terms of creation, then I think Jabari is a clear third. Maybe you can argue Fred, but that shot has not been falling for him, hasn't been falling all season long, and I think that's why the Warriors were more than comfortable playing conservative coverages against against Jalen, because they were not counting on those shots to fall. They were not counting on them to create off of the dribble, and speaks to the lack of their creation on the perimeter, their ball handling. And I think, Jabari, he may not be he may not solve all of those problems, especially off the dribble creation, but he's an option out there to kind of take the pressure off of you. And I don't think you have much to like. I mean, it's Amen maybe, but this is like a trial by fire for him too. Like like they're completely fine with Amen creating off the dribble, and then like, hey, let's see what you can do. Can you make those shots from the outside? Are you willing to take those shots from the outside? And if we're gonna let you shoot those mid-range shots all day long, and then if you come at the rim, we're gonna send multiple bodies against you, and then we're gonna force you to make a decision off of that. So, you know, I think besides that, I mean, if they can't get like a half court offense going, then basically the only thing that they can count on is their offensive rebounding, the possession battle, and I just don't think that's sustainable over the course of a playoff series, and over the course of a playoff run, because even if they do manage to, let's say, they get the offensive rebounding is the cause of their success this series. If they get past the Warriors, then there are much better teams out there in the West that can like take that away, or say, hey, we're not affected by that. Much taller teams than the Warriors, where they can match up with your size, where they can box you out, where they can nullify all of your one-way players. So, I mean, it's not sustainable in the long run. So they really have to unlock their half-court offense. And I think for me, the first step for that is Jabari, and also just getting Jalen and Şengün going and trying to create off of their the attention that they draw.
Those are great points, and I think the 3 point shooting is like the obvious theme here, where it's if and this goes for a lot of playoff talk, like you just can't have holes at this level, and if you're playing multiple one way players, like you say, like they're gonna get picked on, and a small guard like FVV, he said it a million times, like you got to be able to defend and shoot to have impact as a small guard in this league, and if he's not bringing it, then it's hard to have that winning impact. And good note on Jabari. He made some big help defense plays, I thought, like switchability on the defensive side. I'd like to see them involve him a little more offensively. I mean, Houston did have a little 17-3 run. Like they made a game out of it at times. So like they were in it. And so I'm interested to see, can they shut down Steph and maybe force, not, and shut downs a lot, but can they really slow him down and really force, say, Jimmy to beat them, even though, yes, Jimmy can do it too. Like, you got to cut off something. So, like, can you affect the Steph the way that you affected him back in the regular season, where you have all these elite, lengthy defenders to throw at him with Amen and Tari and FEV and Dylan Brooks? There's a little bit of that, like, wearing down Steph factor on the other end, where Dylan Brooks is generally matched up with him. Steph's guarding him. Dylan has a size advantage. Maybe he can like get him in foul trouble, or just back him down enough times where he gets gassed for a possession or something, like just anything to slow down Steph, the energy ball that he brings. Like that, you got to do something there, and you got to create some offense. And good notes that they have some scorers. So can they find that balance? Like this is the flip side of depth, in my opinion, is okay, you have the options to play all these different players and you can handle all these different lineups, but do you actually have two-way floor balance against the other team's best five? And do you have a lineup you can roll out that has no holes that the other team can't take advantage of? And like you mentioned with Amen Thompson, he's been insane this year. He's been one of the most exciting players, athletes, defenders in the whole league, but he has a questionable jump shot and scoring attributes at the moment. So it's his first time here. You're going to go ahead and sag off him a little bit too, and take away the easy stuff at the rim, let non-shooters shoot, and that's pretty good defensive strategy if you're the Warriors and there isn't like a clear couple of things or a couple of stars or players that you really have to dial in on, take away the bad shots or take away the easy shots and give them the bad shots. So that's a pretty way to go about it. They the Warriors took game one. It looks like they are as confident as ever. I think this Jimmy trade has revitalized the whole team, the whole franchise to the point where they believe they can win it all, and rightfully so, because they've done it before. And I don't think there's one team that wants to see Steph Curry and Draymond Green and Jimmy Butler and defense in a playoff series. So, one last question here. How far are the Warriors going to go? How far do you think is realistic? Are they set on championship or bust after all this?
To me, I think of course, if they reach the finals, then like, hey, like, they win, like, we're gonna have like the conversations about stuff again, et cetera, et cetera. But yeah, I mean, I wouldn't count them out going as far as the conference finals. I think it's possible for them to reach the conference finals, and against the Thunder, it's gonna be tough. I mean, the Thunder are like just heads above everyone else at the
What's
moment.
interesting with the Thunder, not to cut you off, is that this will really be the test of this defense talk that we've kind of gotten at. Is like, this is one of the most elite defenses ever. But could the Thunder's offense bog down a little bit in that playoff series, kind of like it did against the Mavs, where the Warriors know who they are offensively? They have a few reliable things they can roll out. That's a real dynamic I want to see if we do get to that series.
Yeah, to a lesser extent, I guess you could say they could bog down. The one thing obviously that the Thunder have that the Rockets don't have is they have Shea,
The MVP, yeah.
the MVP. So, but yeah, I mean, I like the Warrior. Like one thing the Warriors defense has always been historically good at in a playoff series is they just kind of like they bog you down and then they just dare everyone else to they take away who your best or your offensive lifeline is. And then they just kind of like make everyone else like, hey, if you can make that shot, then good for you. But we're not gonna let this guy beat us. And that's always been their calling card in the playoffs. And that's gonna be like the Thunder are gonna be tested in that way. Like we're talking hypotheticals, but if it were Thunder Warriors final, like our conference finals, then it's kind of like you're testing the Thunder if they can just grab the torch from the Warriors, where can you beat this team that knows how to get to the peak and knows how to take away what you do best. And if they manage to do that, and I think like hey, they're ready to take the crown, and then it's kind of like a passing of the torch moment. Or if you're the Thunder, you're just grabbing the torch from the Warriors. So yeah, I mean, personally, I want to see that matchup. And Shea versus Steph is going to be, it's one heck of a matchup. But we're getting ahead of ourselves because the Warriors are. There's still a lot of work to do for that matchup to materialize. I mean, it's just a 1-0 lead in the first round. I mean, things can change. You and me know better than most that in a playoff series, just like a few possessions can change the tenor of a series. And it's the journey, it's the process that's fun, especially this time of year. So I'm looking forward to how the Rockets can counter what the Warriors try to do. Looking forward to what the Warriors will do to maintain their advantage of the Rockets, and also just excited to see how the rest of the other playoff series play out. So yeah, I mean, I'm ready to dig in. I mean, Nuggets Clippers is about to start, so I'm ready to dive into that as well. I mean, that's like I think for me that's been the best first round matchup so far. It's lived up to the billing certainly. So yeah, I mean, it's just a good time for basketball sickos like you and me.
Absolutely, man. I mean, we skipped right over the Lakers T-Wolves second round. They'll have
Yeah.
to deal with one of those teams too. We might get LeBron and Steph again with Luka and Jimmy involved. I mean, talk about a fun time to be a basketball fan. I mean, whether it's the Thunder and Steph Shea or Steph LeBron, it's fun to see all this star talent, healthy, competitive, so many great teams. The Warriors are back. Dub season, where it never ends. This Dub dynasty, they just can never stay down. They can't help themselves but get back up. So can't wait to kind of see how it plays out. And game ones historically can be a little misleading, and I don't know if that'll be the case for this series. But there's been quite a few times where some team looks dominant game one, and then they don't win another game, or they don't really compete the rest of the way, and you never really see it coming. So I wonder, where maybe there will be one or two teams like that this playoff round where they didn't look great in the first game, but then they go off to win 4 of the next 5. And I wouldn't be surprised. That seems to happen once or twice every playoff. So that's something to keep in mind as well. But that being said, the Warriors look legit, and we've hit on kind of what the Rockets will have to do to adapt, and it's not really easy. It's not like an obvious adjustment or play. I don't think like it's just winning everything on the margins and trying to be able to just will their way to a win. And I think that, like we said before, I think it works on the aggregate in the regular season, but in a playoff series, when teams can kind of dial in on your strengths and weaknesses and take away your top 3 strengths and make you beat them with your weaknesses, like that's where the depth and balance comes into play, where the weakest link can really make or break the whole. You're only as strong as your weakest link. So um there's a lot of great teams. Excited to see how it plays out, and man, this is exciting times to be a basketball fan, as you say. Can't wait to see game 2. I believe it's Wednesday at 9:30 Eastern with Warriors Rockets, and we'll see where this series goes. And appreciate you taking the time today, Joe. It's always fun talking hoops and talking Warriors, talking Steph. It's a lot of fun talking about this league. So thanks for hopping in, sharing your perspective and your process breaking down film. And you got to follow Joe on Twitter at Joe Viray NBA and check out all his awesome work covering the Warriors and the NBA.
Thanks for having me.
You already know. Have a good one, Joe. Learning Basketball is a Swish Theory podcast hosted from Beyond the Arcade. Hey, that's me. You can find my work on Twitter, YouTube, Substack, and check out the team's writing at theswishtheory.com.